Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll introduce ourselves.
I'm Giselle Guerrero.
Lovely. I am Carolyn Homer. I'm a law student a mile away at George Washington University, and I competed at nationals in 2005 in this competition.
My name is Edna Decanic. I'm an incoming student here at Georgetown Law. I'm also an alumna of the program, class of 2007. I was in Unit 4, also competed at nationals.
I'm Steve Livengood. I'm a guide at the U.S. Capitol, and I get to talk about these issues to people every day.
So we have chosen today to do Unit 4, Question 2. And I will read it to you, and then you can start your answer, and the timer will start. So, in Federalist 74, Alexander Hamilton claimed that the propriety of the constitutional provision making the president commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy was so evident in itself that little needs to be said to explain or enforce it. Not everyone has agreed. What are the arguments for and against making the president the commander-in-chief? Article 2, Section 2 designates the president as commander-in-chief of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. When and why have presidents used this authority? How and why has the conception of the power of the commander-in-chief been expanding since the time of Abraham Lincoln? You may begin.
Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution states, the President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of several states when called into actual service of the United States. But there are different opinions about whether or not the President should be Commander-in-Chief, and this issue is important because presidential power has been expanded since the Civil War.
One argument against making the president the commander-in-chief is that the new and inexperienced presidents may not know what to do in time of crisis. For example, President Obama has not had any experience with the military, so he may not have enough insight into making the best decision of time of crisis. Another reason is against making the president the commander-in-chief is that the president already has enough power, and too much power could lead to tyranny.
On the other hand, a reason for making the president the commander-in-chief is to ensure that someone elected by the people is making our most important military decisions. Similarly, it ensures sovereign control of the military. Sovereign control is important because we live in a democratic republic, and the people are the ultimate source of authority. Also, the president has many advisors to provide information about military actions, even if the president does not have much military experience himself.
The president has used this authority to enforce civil rights laws such as the Little Rock Nine. During this iteration, 9 African American students were switching to a majority white school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The children faced opposition when switching schools, so President Eisenhower had to step in and send federal troops, the National Guard, to escort them to school.
Over the years, the power of the president has expanded, especially since President Lincoln. One reason is because the people expect the president to act energetically to address the nation's problems, especially in time of crisis or emergency. A second reason is due to the fact that the powers are not enumerated in the Constitution. Therefore, it is difficult to understand exactly what they are. The third reason for the growth of the executive power is the president's role in recommending legislation to Congress. That is why we say things like Obama's health care bill when actually Congress has passed the health care bill.
More recently, President Bush expanded his presidential powers during the Iraq War to battle Al-Qaeda. President Bush claimed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The CIA told President Bush that there was no evidence that Iraq attacked the USA, and also that there were no weapons of mass destruction. Even with this evidence, the president's decision remained the same.
Presidential historian John Job supports the idea of a strong presidential power, while author Gary Wills argues against it. According to Wills, the commander-in-chief basically has control over the fate of the war. He also states that the most important in the presidency so far is the creation of the atomic bomb. The bomb forever changed the institution of the presidency. Since only the president controls the button, this is a monumental change because now the American president has strong powers and can literally destroy the planet.
It is our belief that with the ever-changing threats of today's society, it is appropriate that the president's power increases to some degree, but we need to ensure the system of checks and balances limit the president's ever-increasing power so that it doesn't increase too quickly and by too much.
Thank you. So I want to follow up on what you just ended with, Gazelle, which is who should be able to overrule the commander-in-chief. So some national crisis happens, the commander-in-chief makes some immediate war power decision, but people don't like it. Like, what should be the check on that? Or what is the check on that?
The person in charge of the military should be the person that checks the president because he has more experience with the military and he would know what to do and like if we should send more troops or not.
I think what my partner say, I would say that the generals should be the commander-in-chief. Like my partner say that they have more experience during military decisions during wartime. So I would argue that the general should be the commander-in-chief.
So do you think we should pass a constitutional amendment moving the commander-in-chief power away from the president?
I don't think so, because I argue that there should not be amendment or a law, just they had to prove that the general should be the commander-in-chief.
I would agree that's a possible solution, seeing as how presidents usually don't have much military experience, whereas some presidents do, a lot of presidents don't.
Sort of talking about this growth of executive power, and you mentioned one of you the Iraq War, and so I'm curious how you feel this question fits in with the war on terror, and whether that situation qualifies as something that the commander-in-chief should execute these traditional military powers, or does he have the ability to take away some of our liberties in this war?
Can you say that question again?
Sure. So you spoke about the Iraq War and the president's role in that, and I'm curious about your feelings on the war on terror and how the president's role as the commander-in-chief should fit in with this sort of unconventional wartime situation.
Well, the war started when Bush sent troops, I believe. He sent troops to Afghanistan without the consent of Congress. And I mean, that was, I guess, in some sense it was wrong. And
I agree with my partner because the war on terror basically started as if Bush sent troops over there in retaliation to the Twin Towers incident in New York, and he maybe didn't really have a real reason to why he did. He just say, "Oh, they did this to us, so we're gonna go over there and destroy their homeland or do things to them over there." That's what they did.
I agree with both my partners because in the war on terrorism, the president's power has increased by sending their troops to Iraq war without, like Garen said, without getting the consent of Congress, and it fits in by the presidential powers increasing, like, and maybe soon, I guess, if Congress doesn't check on what powers, what decisions the president makes, then they might increase to a higher level.
So,
I want to get to one point. The Congress has not declared war since 1941. Do we have a war? Are these wars, in fact, under the Constitution?
No.
I think, I remember hearing at some point that they're not actually classified as wars. I think they're classified as conflicts because it's usually the president that forces them.
So it's not Congress declaring war, it's the president sending troops to invade another country, and technically it's not called a war.
So should that decision be the president's or a general's?
I believe it should be the generals because the president is sending troops over there. If it's not declared a war, then why are they over there fighting if it's not a war? What's their main purpose of being over there? I believe that the general should be the commander-in-chief because I believe if the general is, I believe that he can probably have a real reason, okay, he can talk to Congress and say, okay, we're going to declare this a war. And because he has more military sense or knowledge about what's going on, you want to call it a war. But with the president, it's just, okay, I'm just going to send some troops over there and we just want to fight. Like, what's your main reason for being over there?
Let me make sure I understand you correctly. Did you say that a general should be able to declare war instead of the Congress?
No, I said that the general should, I believe that if the general was in charge of commander-in-chief, he can run it back Congress and maybe talk to Congress and they can debate or whether it should be declared a war or not.
I would have to disagree with my partner because I think there are a lot of more aspects to war than just making military decisions. There's also social aspects and how the war is going to affect both sides economically and on a social level as well.
To follow up on that, speaking of the social aspect of war, how do you think the public, what role do they play in terms of the commander-in-chief's decision? Maybe give some examples where public opinion has played a role in helping him make his choices about war.
We can say the public has tried to protest by not sending troops, but their voices hasn't been heard because Obama still sent troops to Afghanistan. So,
I'm diverting a little bit, but the Constitution does not give the president any sort of official emergency powers, like to declare a state of emergency and just kind of put military rule over everything. I'm just curious as to whether you think we should or should not have that power. Like, should the president be able to just say, we're in a state of emergency?
I think in emergency situations that the president should be able to act freely and without the constraints of Congress. Because Congress, they usually make deliberative decisions, and in a state of emergency, it's best to make quick on-the-fly decisions, and that's why we have the president set in place to make those decisions.
Right.
But what? Oh, time's out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so excellent job. And one thing I really loved was that all of you got engaged in the answers and you weren't afraid to disagree with each other. And I love it when people disagree because there are multiple sides to any argument. One comment, you did a pretty good job of coming up with examples, especially about recent wars. But a little bit of history, especially from like the Vietnam era, would have answered a ton of questions too. So there were people who burned draft cards because they were so against the war, and there were student protests, and that was a huge era. And so if you maybe just looking up a little bit about the Vietnam War, or looking up past during the Vietnam War was the War Powers Act, in which Congress actually gave the president this huge amount of extra authority on top of the commander-in-chief power, which is one of the reasons we don't actually declare war anymore. So those are just a couple things to look into if you move on. But otherwise, you guys are excellent.
Again, thank you. I agree with a lot of what my fellow judge here said. I've been in your position, so I know it's very nerve-wracking. I think you all did an excellent job. I also love that you all talked, that you didn't hesitate to express your opinion on different issues. I would have liked to see some more depth on the examples on some of them, and also on some of the constitutional issues with Congress and the president. But other than that, I thought you did very well.
I was really impressed with the range and the depth of understanding that you have. As a historian in particular, I want to re-emphasize what they said about finding examples. I would go back to the Mexican War, the War of 1812, and find out what happened there, because that's when those are the precedents on which we have based our decisions. And of course, then they have new ramifications, but you can't really understand the decisions now until you go back and look at when we were building democracy. But you show a good understanding. I threw you a curveball, and you handled it very, very well.
One other comment I wanted to make is your opening statement was
very good.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm a law student, and there's a set way you answer legal questions, and you followed that structure without knowing it. And it was you start out with a constitutional provision, and then you explain its history, and you go, you just did it very well, and I was impressed.
Thank you.